Auckland University's put a freeze on hiring staff in a bid to claw back what it estimates will be $30 million in losses this semester due to the coronavirus outbreak. The university has about 2,000 Chinese students who can't get into the country due to a travel ban preventing any foreigners who have been in or transited through China in the past 2 weeks from entering New Zealand. New Zealand citizens and permanent residents and their immediate families are exempt from the restrictions but have to self-isolate for 14 days. Victoria University estimates coronavirus could cost it $12 million this year, but says the financial impact will flow into at least the next 2 years and the varsity will need to find significant cost reductions. Professor Stuart McCutcheon is Vice-Chancellor at the University of Auckland. I asked him what steps they're taking to soften the financial blow.
Well, what we've done today really is to announce a hiring freeze on new staff positions. So what that means is that for most of the potential new staff positions we would be looking at this time of the year, we will not be hiring. Not to say we won't hire ever, but we're basically suspending that process. The positions that we will still hire into are those that are particularly needed to support our students, because of course all our students, well, most of our students are coming back at the moment. And there will be some positions that we need to account for the extra work that's involved in dealing with the coronavirus situation.
Okay, Can you put it in context for us? How much do you estimate that you could be out of pocket this semester due to coronavirus?
Well, we've got about 2,000 students still in China who ordinarily would have been here. The total revenue that's at risk is a bit over $30 million. And then we'll incur additional costs. So if we're needing to double teach programs, for example, or support our students and staff in particular ways, that will increase our cost burden as well. But certainly on the revenue side, something over $30 million in the first semester.
So then, well, what is a staff freeze going to save you, really? Because it seems like a drop in the bucket.
Well, not really. We have 8,000 staff and we turn over staff typically at 6 or 7% a year. So there's a reasonable amount of new hiring that's going to be done. But realistically, when you look at a university, we are a people business, and so most of our costs are in people. We can save a few dollars here and there on consumable costs and travel costs, but the real cost is in staffing. And if we want to prepare to respond to what may be a very difficult year financially, then reducing our staff hiring is the only sensible way to do that. Now, if we get in a situation where the students can come and where we can get back to normal, then obviously we would take that freeze off. We would have delayed some hiring, so that's a saving. But our annual salary budget is in the order of $600 million a year, so a freeze even for a certain period of time will be helpful.
So how many positions do you think are currently vacant that you won't fill?
I think there's about 150 positions in process at the moment. Some of those will be filled because they are necessary for our teaching requirements.
But the vast majority?
But the majority, I would think, will put on hold as a result of this freeze. I don't have the precise numbers, but it'll be something of that order.
So, well, does this bring into question your business model here? If you're having to make drastic cuts because you're relying on 2,000 foreign students, should you be rethinking that?
Well, we rely financially on all of our students, so whether it's 2,000 foreign students or 2,000 domestic students is not the issue. The fact of the matter is that we have 2,000 students who are not able to be here at the start of the academic year, and that has a significant financial impact on the university. Also worth remembering, of course, and even more important, it has a huge impact on the students. So these students are typically from single-child families in China, a country with modest social welfare provisions, and the future of those families depends on their children getting a good education. So, there are issues on both sides, but certainly from our point of view, the business model that we operate requires that we have 40,000 students in the place a year. We have enough staff to teach and support that number of students. And if a significant proportion of those students are not able to join us, then clearly that has an impact on the university, and it would be a similar impact if suddenly 2,000 domestic students disappeared.
So what practical effect will this freeze on hiring have? So it's potentially going to save you money, but what kind of pressure will it put the university under?
Well, in the long term, it would, of course, put pressure on. In the short term, we're just going to have to cope. So already we have lots of staff who are working very hard to deal with the additional workload that arises as a result of the ban. And a staff freeze in some parts of the university, I don't doubt, will put pressure on. But you've also got to think about the other option. The other option is to do nothing. And then if we find ourselves in a financial hole later in the year, we potentially end up in a situation of redundancies. So there is no easy way out of this, and we think that the hiring freeze at the moment is a prudent way of tightening up on expenditure until we can find out what our financial situation is actually going to be like.
Have you flagged to the Minister that you may not achieve the surplus required?
Well, we haven't had to flag that because the Minister will know that, and so will the officials. If your required operating surplus is $30 to $40 million a year and you have at risk $30 million of revenue, it's pretty obvious that it's going to be difficult to make your operating surplus. So that's an obvious point, and I'm sure that the Tertiary Education Commission and the Minister understand that.
Have you always thought that this ban was unnecessary?
Well, I don't see a justification for the ban. I understand that there are public health issues and public relations, public perception concerns. The reality, though, is that the government has allowed, I understand, something in the order of 9,000 New Zealanders, Australians, permanent residents and their dependents back into the country with what is a fairly light touch quarantine procedure, as I read the Ministry of Health guidelines.
So is this racism then, or discrimination?
Well, I don't know whether it's racism. I mean, I think there are questions of public perception. So I suppose many New Zealanders, I wouldn't be one of them, but some New Zealanders might think that there is less danger of importing the virus when a New Zealander comes back from China than when a Chinese student comes back. I wouldn't hold to that view.
Or is it just that they have different immigration status? Is it just that they have are characterised as a permanent resident or a citizen, so there's a different responsibility to them?
It might be. That might be part of it. And so I can see the government has a different responsibility to permanent residents and citizens than it does have to others. But microbes generally don't respect borders, and so my concern is whether the ban is justified on the likelihood that these students will bring the virus in, as opposed to the likelihood that somebody else will.
And that's Professor Stuart McCutcheon, Vice-Chancellor at the University of Auckland. Education Minister Chris Hipkins has given us this statement. He says this is a fast-evolving situation. The government is conscious of the impact the travel restrictions might have on universities and continues to reassess it, with public health and safety kept front of mind.